National Kenya Constitution of Kenya Review Commission, yes. The Constitution of Kenya Review Commission. Professor Yashpal Guy is in the house. He is here, accompanied by Jill Guy. So we acknowledge you as well. And we acknowledge all who are here, including those who participated in the KHRC, like Betty Murungi, who is here. Great KHRC report. The fight must continue. The fight must do what? Continue. Okay. Let's now begin this event, and we begin with the prayer that we gave unto ourselves upon independence, and we call that prayer the national anthem. And that prayer is going to call on all of us to stand up as I welcome the Field Marshal's band to lead us through the national prayer, also known as the national anthem.
Now I announce. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, comrades, power! Viva Kenya, viva! Viva Africa, viva! Viva! We will ask you to all rise up for a minute of silence for all the comrades and soldiers and everybody that we have lost along the way. Say them in your heart. A minute of silence, please, for all our fallen comrades. Asante.
Thank you very much. Now, let's do a round of applause, please, for the Field Marshal. Let's recognize them. So, our clarion call for this evening is to make sure that we keep pushing in the fight and in the pursuit of rights in this country. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to call somebody to give us our welcoming remarks, to set the scene for today, so that then we can hear from several other speakers. And as people come, we are going to be putting our hands together and clapping, and then we end with, Ole yo! Yo! Let's put our hands together for the current Executive Director of the Kenya Human Rights Commission, Mr. Davis Malombe, to come and give us his opening remarks. Makofi ya kilo tafadhali. Shangwe na vigelegele. Ole yo!
Bundio mana
Ole yo Ninataka
nataka uwengu
uende
kulinda nafsi zetu
uhuru
uangaze Afrika tulenge lengo la ukombozi
tulenge
lengo la ukombozi
Ninataka
nataka roho yangu
iende
kulinda nafsi zetu
uhuru
uangaze Afrika tulenge lengo la ukombozi tulenge lengo la ukombozi.
Comrades power. Comrades power. I'm very much delighted to open this session, which we have been planning for a long time. My remarks are basically about celebrate, organize, and deliberate, because we have come a long way and there's a lot of work which needs to be accomplished. Before I proceed, I just want to recognize and also pay homage to a number of KHRC staff members who have also left us along the way. The first one is Japheth Chalo. So those who have been in KHRC for a long time, you can remember some of those colleagues: Japheth Chalo, Refa Amindo, Grace Mukenda, Max Mila Wekesa, Noelina Nabwire, and Juguna Mutai. Those are the ones I remember who have been part of this journey, and they have left us. So we also have to remember them as we commemorate 30 years of KHRC. Just a brief background about us. We were established in the US in 1992 by 5 compatriots. That is Professor Macau Mutua, of course, we have Maina Kiai, Dr. Willy Mutunga. You may not know this, Kiraitu Murungi, and Peter Karevi. And then, because we are doing a book about KHRC, the whole history and where we are, we have come to learn, Prof, the idea of forming KHRC began in 1991, but the completion came in 1992 when the registration happened in the US, when the 5 compatriots were in exile, and then we were registered in Kenya in 1994. So when you hear our moderator saying about 30 years plus, it's because 2022, we marked 20 years, 30 years since the registration in the US, but now this year, we are marking 32 years. It was not possible to celebrate 30 years in 2022 because of also the state of the nation, who are going through political and economic challenges. And therefore, the board advised us to just focus on memorialization and the liberation agenda for the country and see whether this year can work. This year was not easy. We started with floods, then protests, and that's why this event is coming toward the end. Ideally, we should have done this in April. So as we mark 30 years, which was when we were delivered, Prof, I think in my reflection yesterday, I remembered, I think the gestation period took like 10 years. Because you guys, you were arrested in 1981, Will was arrested in 1982. So I think the notion of political liberation, you guys started 10 years before. So we are more than 30 years old. But I also remember that we also build on the DNA of the Mau Mau movement. So that is our political background, where our inspiration comes from. And this is confirmed by the fact that we have been part of the second liberation, the third liberation, and we have been supporting the leadership of the Mau Mau movement, which is the first generation. Gitu Kaegeri, who was not able to join us today because he's unwell, has told us many times that the members of the KHRC family are Mau Mau, because they have a category of associates who have stood with them, and also they have also another category of people who also believe in their struggle. So we connect with them because of those two bases. So over time, we have been recognized and also feared in the same measures because of the kind of the issues we handle. And I know Prof who will be talking about that. There are many times he has guided us in the board that the commission should be the institution which the violators fears most. So we have tried to have the balance of the same, and we have been able to lead in so many human rights and governance issues in the country and also in the region. And I'll just give you a few examples. For example, we have nurtured and supported so many national, community-based, and international human rights organizations to operate, because it has not been easy for them to register. Even right now, we are hosting more than 5 organizations. So that has been one of our biggest contributions to the movement. And I know a lot of KHRC staff have also been critical members and also leaders of the national, regional, and the national human rights movement. I can count, for example, more than 20 executive directors of the human rights movement who come from our former staff and even our former interns. We have been able to produce more than 5 commissioners and many regional directors. And of course, we have been able to pioneer a lot of work in our society, starting with transitional justice. Macau led the task force to look at the viability of the Truth Commission. which he said he found an opportunity to push the KHRC agenda. And it is that process which led to Betty becoming the vice chair, who was even seconded by the KHRC board. And I remember Betty, myself, Wafula Buke, who is there, among others, discussing about how we are going to have victims become part of the TRC process. And we accomplished that very strategically. Of course, our work on statelessness, we have pioneered that, corporate accountability, labor justice, even election, especially when you are pushing the justice as opposed to reforms agenda of elections, and of course, LGBTI issues, among others. Davida says we are domestic towards national, and I'm sure he'll be talking about this. What does that mean, being a domestic towards a national organization? Because he's going to be the next speaker, is going to speak about that. And just to say, in this journey, we have been supported and we have worked with so many partners. And that's why we invited you to be part of this. So this event is about remembering the journey of Kenya in pushing the human rights agenda, where KHRC becomes part of the key actors and contributors. And we have faced so many challenges because of the kind of actors we deal with, especially the powerful corporate, state, and individual violators. And we know this is obvious because the Kanu state and also the colonial state has never left us, despite the fact that we have a very transformative and a progressive constitution. So we have faced so many threats from the system, and right now we are even having a big fight with one of the corporates, who is Safaricom. And we are not going to give up the fight because I think they cannot be held to account. Safaricom, especially their contribution to the atrocities which were experienced during the GNC. There's a time, Dr. David D., and allow me to quote him over the past. He did analysis in 2013 about the past regimes from Kenyatta up to Uhuru Kenyatta, and he said he was looking at three variables: whether the regimes have been liberal, whether they have been corrupt, or they have been competent. And over the Jubilee government in 2013, he said that kind of ways of running public affairs is about a government which is corrupt, illiberal, and incompetent. So when you look at all the regimes we have had since 2013, it's about Kanusm. And therefore you can see where we are going with the current situation. Today I saw a report from Civica saying Kenya has been downgraded in terms of the state of civic space from being obstructed to repressed. It means now we are bordering, basically, in simple terms, on a dictatorship. So a lot of work needs to be done, and I just want to talk about three things. One, I think we must ensure that we get justice for our agency. We get the culprits who we know they are state and they are corporate actors to be able to account. I'm saying this because I think towards 2027, it is the Gen Z who are going to determine how we are going to proceed. But if justice is not fostered and accountability is not enhanced, it means it's going to be very difficult for them to come out and keep on organizing. And of course, we must protect their votes because we know the system will do what is possible to repress them and ensure that they are not going to get IDs, they are not going to register as voters, and therefore make the determination we need. Of course, all of us have been talking about pushing for an alternative political leadership, because from our side as KHRC, for all along, we know there's a link between human rights, elections, and politics. The kind of regime you get determines the nature of human rights state you get. So we must push for alternative political leadership, and the people have been talking about how would this look like. To me, where I see it, the constitution is very clear. It must be a regime which is grounded on Article 1, which acknowledges the sovereign power of the people, which is guided on the principles of good governance in Article 10, which operates on the principles of Article 19, where human rights is supposed to be the basis for pushing political, social, and cultural policies. What we call actually at KHRC, human rights centered governance, a regime which is grounded on the principles of Article 73 on integrity, accountability, a regime which serves the people. So I think the constitution is very clear in terms of the parameters of this democratic regime we have been yearning for. So as I conclude, I just want to challenge us to continue politically organizing, politically celebrating the gains we have made, because if you don't celebrate the gains, you would have the political energies to push the next strongholds. And of course, remain vigilant, because we are facing a repressive state. And then also use these moments of celebration to also keep on reflecting and also organizing. So next year, in March, we are marking 30 years since the killing of J.M. Kariuki. So I think that should be the next moment of also serious convening and organizing. So I want to finish with the third stanza, second stanza of the national anthem, sorry, which basically actually is a political call for action. So you can join me. Amkeni ndugu zetu, tufanye zote bidii, nasi tujitoe kwa nguvu, nchi yetu ya Kenya tunayoipenda, tuwe tayari kuilinda, tuwe tayari kuilinda. We must defend our nation. Allow me to welcome General Davinda Lamba, the chair of the Kenya Human Rights Commission, to also make his remarks.
Everyone. Karibu tena. Hamjambo zote. You know, after Malombe has spoken, you need a little bit of silence so it can settle down. But I will continue. The Board of Directors and the management of the Kenya Human Rights Commission, KHRC, are delighted to extend a very warm welcome to everyone to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the establishment of KHRC in 1994 in Kenya. I have a personal story to tell about the registration of KHRC as an NGO in 1994. It was a struggle. When the application for registration of KHRC was tabled before the newly constituted NGOs Coordination Board under the NGOs Coordination Oppressive Act of 1993, it was opposed by the government side of the board, led by an academic jurist who will finally end up on the bench. He argued that KHRC was a political organization and not a development organization, and therefore we oppose the application for registration. Why do I know this story? Dr. Willie Mutunga, myself and others were also members of the board, that is the NGOs Coordination Board, representing the National Council of NGOs, also constituted under the NGOs Coordination Act, which I always resisted. It's not the business of the state to organize civil society. But let me continue. Dr. Mutunga excused himself from the meeting because of KHRC association. Isn't that amazing? The rest of us secured the registration after a prolonged argument that the separation of human rights and development was a false dichotomy between the political and the development. It was a false dichotomy. It was a prolonged argument, and KHRC was registered as an NGO. Today, human rights and development, human rights and governance, human rights and justice, in my view, form that web of relations which is at the core of the constitutionalism emerging from the transformative constitution of 2010. This is in my view. That's the web of relations which is at the core of our constitutionalism. From a briefcase NGO, meaning empty coffers, no money, as Chief Maina describes it, who is not with us, sent his apology, KHRC has evolved into a formidable domestic transnational organization. It is domestic, but it has worked across the borders. Unlike any organization elsewhere in the North, which is domestic but is dubbed international. This was my characterization a long time ago. KHRC is resilient because it has not buckled or withered in the fight for rights for 3 decades among various geographies of injustice in the country. Bado mapambano. The struggle continues. This collective achievement is due to the contributions of the erstwhile board members, needless to mention the founders, executive directors, staff, and partners of KHRC, the erstwhile. We are glad that many of you are here to celebrate this momentous occasion. And I thank you all. Finally, I would like to recognize all the current board members who are present and absent here. To start with, Narima Wako, Executive Director, Siasa Place. Narima. Please stand up, Narima. Narima, are you here? No. Okay. Lorna Dias, Executive Director, Gays and Lesbian Coalition of Kenya. Lorna Dias. Wanjiro Gikonyo, founder and former national coordinator, the Institute for Social Accountability, TISA. I guess there'll be a Nane soon. I think so. Kwamchatsi Mokoha, on the front line for the struggle for human dignity for 2 decades, and well-published columnist and a human rights strategist. Maina Kiai, the founder of KHRC, and a founding director of the Human Rights Watch. We have his apology for not being with us tonight. And lastly, Father Gabriel Dolan, former executive director, Hakietu, a CSO based in Mombasa, now here represented by the new executive director, Peter Kiyama. Father Gabriel Dolan was honored with the 2023 Irish Presidential Distinguished Service Award for Human Rights Work, and that was mostly in Kenya. I thank you for your attention. I know I have been told by many of my colleagues, you heard Firimbi. And I said, I'll only do it if there's a public demand. Is there a public demand for Firimbi? Here we go. And those of you, you know, Operation Firimbi is a campaign I coordinated from '96 onward under the auspices of Mazingira Institute against public land grabbing, corruption, and for land reform. So let's blow the Firimbi again on all the ways past, present, and that we might see in the future. I hope the police doesn't show up here. Again, thank you for your attention.
Can we give the chairman a deserved round of applause, please? All the way until he takes his seat, keep clapping. And he's going to bask in that glory, of course. He's not going to sit very fast, so just keep clapping. There you go, now he's seated. Ole yo! I want to acknowledge the presence of a few people. Irene Maina is the country director for Diakonia Kenya. Please acknowledge Diakonia Kenya. Asante sana. Here with us from the Swiss Embassy, we have Steve Tharakan and Isabel Cartman. A round of applause, please. We have the Makueni watu wanapenda human rights. The former governor is here. The current senator of Makueni County, Dan Manzo, is as well in the house. We are going to hear from the founding executive director of the Kenya Human Rights Commission, Maina Kiai. He's recorded a message for us to watch. But before we watch it, please allow me to welcome and acknowledge some of the current very vocal and very active defenders of human rights. The current president, are you there? What number are you? Do they go with numbers? Yes. The 51st President of the Law Society of Kenya, Faith Odhiambo, please. Keep clapping until she gets here so that she knows. She'll give us 1 or 2 words, and then we shall hear from Maina Kiai. Faith.
I love that. 51. I'll remember that. I love it. To the chairman and the entire board and the CEO of Kenya National, it's Kenya National? No. Kenya Human Rights Commission. Okay, Kenya Human Rights Commission. To our esteemed members and seniors, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Good evening. Today is an interesting crowd because we have had people singing, people blowing whistles. I've been accused of becoming a professional dancer, so I shall not dance. But I'm honored and grateful to be in this room because when I walked in, it's like you see different faces of different family, people that you have not seen in the room. So I thank you so much because you have brought the entire family together. And I heed your call. So, ladies and gentlemen, in 1994, when this esteemed organization was registered, Kenya's challenges looked quite different from what they are today. At the time, our country was facing concerted efforts to move away from authoritarian regime that had derailed our democracy for nearly 2 decades. Then came the reintegration of our country to a multi-party state after a decade of being a single-party state. Back then, human rights were not a reality but an ideal, and the people were not considered the sovereign. They were subjects to be all and end all presidency. 3 decades on, we have a constitutional democracy, a nation governed by the rule of law, and a citizenry ready, able, and willing to exercise their invaluable sovereignty. Human rights are not subject to government whims. They are solemn, inherent, and entitlements extended to every Kenyan. The presidency is not the singular repository of power. We have the power and we now have elaborate and autonomous institutions not meant to exercise authority over the people, but to serve and work on behalf of the people. Yet despite what we are and what we ought to be right now, the similarities in our social, economic, and political context depict a culture of politically induced retrogression attributable to poor governance, breach of the Constitution, and the rule of law, violation of human rights, impunity, and mismanagement of resources. Amid this drawback and reemergence of the vices of old and against the backdrop of widespread disillusionment of people, one voice has remained consistent in doing and standing up for what is right and just: the civil society. The Kenya Human Rights Commission is a stalwart among civil society organizations throughout history. And I must say congratulations for how far you have come. Your motto, Pamoja Tutetee Haki, draws a strong sense of purpose for your organization and all that are affiliated with it. Beyond the obvious interpretation of which calls for unification towards defending human rights, it depicts your commitment to the national values under Article 10 of our Constitution. I have a long speech, but I want to cut it short. And I want to say this. We're celebrating 30 years today. Unfortunately, 30 years on, we're still struggling and grappling with things that we ought not to. We have a constitution that clearly defines the Bill of Rights. Article 10 clearly giving power to the people. But what are we seeing? The massacre by our courts of the rights of the people, particularly on the right to public participation. And I say this with a lot of sadness, because when we look at certain institutions that should be the last bulwark for the people of Kenya, and you say the people are bullying you, you need to be defended from the people. I say, come on. Who do you think you are? So far have we come as a country and a nation. People go to the streets to fight for your independence, and you go and sit at the table to cut deals at the expense of whose life? We have our members of parliament. The Constitution has given our members of parliament immense power to engage and ensure proper development, to ensure that they hold different institutions accountable, to hold the executive accountable. But what we see instead is individuals that are sitting at the table to share cake amongst themselves, forgetting the role that they have to the society and to the nation. An executive that enjoys its power from the Constitution, but fails to remember that this is a social contract that the people have given you. And the Constitution says power belongs to the people. Power belongs to the people. And it gives me great pains because as leaders come and go, they fail to remember that leaders have come and leaders have gone, and those same leaders, as much as they thought they were better or they were bigger than the Constitution, they're the same ones that still run to the courts thereafter to seek solace and protection. And so if you do not defend, you do not protect, you do not build these institutions, where will you come back to run to? We should, as international organizations, you should deny visas. You should deny opportunities for those who bring impunity to our country. Let their children study with us. Let them go with us to Kenyatta National Hospital. Let them feel and enjoy the bus traffic. Let them feel the pains that all of us feel. Then we'll start thinking about how can we make healthcare system work? How can we make education better for our children? When I grew up, people used to be afraid of saying the name Moi. That's the context that I grew up with, and people would say you can't say it, you whisper it. People might hear you. Our Gen Zs have grown up in a different generation, where they don't fear, They have known free education. They have known to demand for better health care and better services. What do we want to give our alphas? Do you want them to fear the executive, to fear their parliament, and to feel that they do not have an independent judiciary? I say civil society, unfortunately, the responsibility still lies heavily upon you. And it's upon us to also impact this fire and energy to the generations that are coming. Tonight, we celebrate the work that you do as an organization, the extra mile that you put yourself out there. And we thank the leaders that have brought the organization to where it is today. As the Law Society of Kenya, we commit to unreservedly cooperate with you in as far as your mandate and our mandate allows. As your motto rightly acknowledges, unity is a prerequisite of true advancement. Accordingly, we solemnly undertake to be your partner to further the monumental work that you do. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish not to take more of your night speaking, but to leave you with the words of President Joe Biden. No fundamental social change occurs merely because the government acts. It takes civil society, the conscience of a country, begins to rise up and demand for change. God bless you all.
Ole yo! Ole yo! Ole yo! All right. Thank you very much. Another round of applause, please, for communication from the bar. We are going to hear now from Maina Kiai. He sent his apologies. He'd have wanted to be here. He is not here, but he recorded a message for all of us. Maina Kiai was among the 5 who founded the Kenya Human Rights Commission. He was the founding executive director, like we've been told even by the chairman. He also was at the foundation of Human Rights Watch, yes. He was the founder chair of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. So he's been right there in the fight for human rights in this country. So before the video plays, can we all just put our hands together, please, and acknowledge Maina Kiai.
The idea of starting Kenya Human Rights Commission was came up in the 90s after seeing Sabasaba from afar.
You cannot silence.
Abroad, okay. And we were talking to each other a lot. The idea of starting Kenya Human Rights Commission came up in the 90s after seeing Sabasaba from afar. We were living abroad.
2 minutes.
And we were talking to each other a lot as the founders, trying to figure out what we could do. And we also, we thought it was important that there's a Kenyan voice that is out there speaking about the Kenyan issues. In the US then, the voices we heard were Americans talking about Kenya and what's going on in Kenya. Sometimes you'd get a few news items of Kenyans in Kenya, but it was clearly very clear that it was Europeans and Americans deciding who will talk So they're the ones who set the agenda. They said, okay, this person is too radical, this one is okay. So they decide there was a place where it was run and organized and controlled from the West. So we thought, there's nowhere and no place in the world where change can ever happen without it being driven by the locals. So the idea of forming Kenya Human Rights Commission came from saying we want to play a role. At that time, we didn't even know whether we were going to come back, whether we're going to be able to locate it in Kenya. So we said, let's do what we can. We're here in the US. Let's register it. So actually, in fact, I did all that work myself. The idea of starting Kenya Human Rights Commission came up in the 90s after seeing Sabasaba from afar. Many were living abroad. The idea of starting Kenya Human Rights Commission came up in the 90s after seeing Sabasaba from afar. Many were living abroad, and we were talking to each other a lot as the founders, trying to figure out what we could do. And we thought it was important that there's a Kenyan voice that is out there speaking about the Kenyan issues. In the US then, the voices we heard were Americans talking about Kenya and what's going on in Kenya. Sometimes you'd get a few news items of Kenyans in Kenya, but it was very clear that it was Europeans and Americans deciding who will talk. So they're the ones who set the agenda. They said, okay, this person is too radical, this one is okay. So they decide there was a place where it was run and organized and controlled from the West. So we thought, there's nowhere and no place in the world where change can ever happen without it being driven by the locals. So the idea of forming Kenya Human Rights Commission came from saying we want to play a role. At that time, we didn't even know whether we were going to come back, whether we're going to be able to locate it in Kenya. So we said, let's do what we can. We're here in the US. Let's register it. So actually, in fact, I did all that work myself. I went and registered it. I went and found the forms. I did everything. Registered it as a non-profit in Washington D.C. Then registered it as a 501c3, which means that any donations will be tax deductible. So I did all that work, but the whole thinking was consistent for a long time. Talking between myself, Peter Karevi, Mukireto Murungi, Willie Mutunga, constantly just discussing with ourselves where we wanted to go. And it was really about having a voice. We wanted to have a voice, and we wanted to, as Kenyans, saying this is where we think human rights should be and how it should go. So that was the real incentive behind it. But then secondly, as well, we were also clear we wanted it different from traditional Western human rights organizations. So we did not want to shy away from the politics of it. Although we ourselves wanted to make sure that as when we were young, we don't hurt ourselves by being involved in politics at the same time. So we'll look at lessons of groups in South Africa that had been around for a long time. Look at groups in Nigeria that had been existing. So we'll look at really Southern and African entities and saying maybe this is how we should model ourselves. But we wanted it to be us. This is our journey. This is our issue. This is our things going on. We've got to work on them and ourselves rather than let others handle it for us. Well, the major aspiration was to get a Kenyan organization flowing on the road, and I think to that extent we succeeded. It's going on. In fact, it was very clear. We said that look at experiences across the world. It was clear that organizations do better when there's transition in leadership. So the founders do not stay for too long, and when they're there for too long, so we are, especially at the operational side of the organization, because you can end up stifling it with only one style, only one way of working. So that was very important. So we said that the first ED, which was me, would last 5 years. I ended up doing 6 years because the 5 years was the election of 97. So we thought leaving in 97 during the elections was suicidal, and we went on for another year till 98 when I left. But it was clear we wanted to make it sustainable. So we had ideas of what we wanted to do. We wanted also to talk about economic and social rights, because that was again within the contestation of human rights globally in the 90s. The West did not see economic and social rights as human rights. They kept pushing away. In fact, Human Rights Watch used to write about saying these are not rights, these are aspirations, they shouldn't be part of it. But again, we were inspired by the causes around in South Africa, where they were very clear. There's not just civil rights, not just right of expression, but also the right to work and the right to work, the right to housing, the right to shelter, the right to health and education. Those are important. How do we fight for them? So we came up with the idea of having a land rights program that would be important for us within the organization. That was the first one. And what, because land rights has really always been the big thing. And for us, land rights is about living. In Kenya, without land, you are finished. You can't do much, whether it's without access to farming or subsistence. So it was very important to us in that way. So to that extent, I think we have succeeded. We also wanted to be a voice. We wanted to be a bit radical. So one of the things we did, that when now we were able to start operationalizing, and there's funding that came through, the first staff we got, we made sure that if you had been expelled from university or had been jailed by the Moi regime, then you found a home, whether either as a job or even as an internship, but you found a home at KHRC. You knew that the sacrifices you had made, whether it was deliberate or accidental, because I think quite a few people who are jailed from Kenya were accidental people, but they suffered for it. So in a way, we're saying, even though you suffered, because you have suffered, we'll give you a home to see where you can train yourself. University student leaders had a place to go, because again, if their options to move further in education and life are curtailed by expulsion, then you have no student movement. And student movement was so important for it to keep going, because everywhere in the world, it's young people who bring change. They're the ones who engineer it, they push it, and hopefully they can lead it. Which is why I think very much that, again, one of the fulfillments of our aspirations is the protests and the uprising that happened in June, July of this year by the youth, by themselves. I think that has got a continuum. If you look at it from KHRC and some of the things we're doing, from doing single file protests against police, against extrajudicial killings by the police, from doing the weekly protests for a new constitution, from all kinds of protests we're doing, and moving that agenda of protesting in an organized way. Even though you're beaten, you come back. That, for me, those seeds were planted. The seeds of 2024 were planted in the 90s by KHRC and others. But it was really that saying that the only way we can bring change is we have to get courageous and face this head on. And we pray and hope that you don't get killed or hospitalized in a process, because that's a possibility. But it's what I have said all my life, that if you're working in this space of human rights, if you're doing something for a cause, you have to think through the risks that are there and accept those risks. Because there's no other way to do it. If you don't want to take the risks, and go and work in an insurance company where you're safe, but it's part of it. So I think we've generated we have helped engender a culture of people that are able to stand up and face up to the state, which is very important. So it is very clear as well in our heads that the state the fundamental problem for us was the state was and is the state. And sadly, we are in a position now in this century, in the 2020s and going on, where there's massive efforts to take us backwards to the 80s and 90s, and you're hearing it with the psychophancy coming out from people like Badi, from Junette and others. It's real psychophancy about let the president do his work. That's not how democracies function. The president doesn't have the monopoly of wisdom, so he's got to be challenged, and through challenge when you get things right. So there's a whole sense going backwards where you can see the abductions are back, which the same thing, trying to cause fear in people and intimidate people. So, but I think we have those seeds were planted. I said, the fact that people now talk on social media and there's all these cartoons going around and all these challenges going around, people are able to laugh and disrespect the person sitting as president. It's very important because as a society, we cannot deify these people in power. The problem is when people get power, they become dangerous. And if we elect them, they will become even more dangerous. So we must ridicule them. We must criticize them. We must attack them. We must bring them down, make them small. Don't even call him by his name only, Ruto. Don't say president. Say Ruto. He's a human. You don't have to call him all these names. But these names and titles we use are the things that cause people to get big heads. Call him by the name. That's his name. He's not president. His name is William Ruto. Call him William Ruto. So we have to stop this deify and this culture that we have generated from the colonial type of putting titles as more important than the person. Respect is not you cannot respect a seat. You respect a person. So I respect a vendor on the streets because he's human and what he's doing with me. If he's rude to me, I won't respect him. Mama Mboga, I respect because he respects me. I respect her and we talk nicely. But if they're insulting me, why should I respect them? And same thing with people in high positions. Because somebody is a minister or has got a title like that, I don't respect the seat. And we must never respect the seat. We respect the person. And we must always keep challenging. Even our friends and people we have worked with, when they go and cross over to a place we think they have crossed over, we've got to ask them the questions. What's happening here? And we've got to be able to ask the question of people we think have had a good history. Because once power is a very, 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 I think the whole thing was challenging power. That's really was the big ethos of Kenya Human Rights Commission. And to that extent, I think it still does that, and I think it does it well. I think it would be nice to see different modes and paths to it, different tactics used beyond it. That's something everybody in the world is trying to think about. What tactics do you use? Because as time comes, the state begins to understand your tactics and begins to blunt them. So you've got to keep 2 or 4 steps ahead of the state in thinking through the tactics to use. I think it'd be great to see a bigger engagement by KHRC in the political scene. And look, I think the country is in almost an existential moment with Ruto in office and where he wants to take the country. So this is a time to be creative, to be courageous, but also to be very, very well planned and organized. And it's time to bring people around the table and figure out how do we work around this. Ruto does not make any pretense that he cares about human rights and cares about humanity. He doesn't make any pretense. And as David D writes, they have never made a point. They've never said they're anti-corruption. So why are we asking them to stop corruption? They have never hidden that they are going to be part and parcel of the problem of corruption in the country. So we've got to be creative and we've got to think through that. But secondly, I think that there is a change in the global scene about the way organizations work and behave. The world has changed. The world has got a lot more authoritarians, xenophobic, anti-people leaders across the world in many parts of the world that are growing, or force. It's not just leaders. Even the mood is becoming more and more anti-human rights, anti-democracy in the way we know it. So it is a time for even organizations to think how do you confront that in the world? We can't. Structures and organizations are set up at particular times to deal with the problems that exist then. When those problems shift and adjust, then it's time for organizations as well to think through how are we approaching these new challenges that are coming up? How would we approach a society in Kenya and even in the region, really, where abductions of people happening from Tanzania to Uganda to Rwanda to Kenya? How do we approach that? How do we approach challenges where because of devolution especially, you are better off having, the central government has devolved. So government is down in the regions. Organizations have not devolved the same way. And maybe they shouldn't devolve the same way as government. But what are we doing, all of us, to be able to have that mentality? Nairobi still seems to be the center and the beginning and the end of almost everything. But maybe we should rethink that. And maybe change will not start in Nairobi and go out to the regions. Maybe it'll start from the regions and come into Nairobi. I think that's what the things to think about. So it's constant thinking that needs to happen, and nobody has a monopoly on the truth or wisdom on these things. All we can do is try different things. They might fail, they might succeed. When we started Kenya Human Rights Commission, my friend, there was no guarantee it would succeed. None. I like to tell people it's a briefcase NGO. When I came back to Kenya, I had a briefcase, and in that briefcase was the whole of Kenya Human Rights Commission. Complete briefcase. Nobody could guarantee it was going to succeed. I didn't know. We put a lot of our effort in there. Some of the directors were kind of kept away for a bit because they weren't sure it's going to work. Of course, once it started, then everybody got interested. Once funding came in, everybody then got interested. But before that, I can tell you, maybe one or two are very keen. Only one or two are very keen, because that's the way human beings go. You get busy, you think this is minus. Debbie, let him work with it. It worked out, then they started coming in anyway. So that's another story altogether. But that's the nature of life. So it's the question now of asking: is Kenya Human Rights Commission tooled well enough? Is it fit for purpose for the challenges of 2024 and beyond? And taking both a political approach, but also an economic approach, because I think one of the big things that's happening is this business area, and to really, to the credit of KHRC, it's been outstanding with Del Monte, Kakuzi, the guys in Solai in Nakuru. It's been outstanding in those areas it's taken up, but it will grow. And you're hearing them talk when they talk about this PPP thing, and they talk the private-public partnership. Where are people there? What is it? And you can see a lot of it is very opaque. How much will it hurt us? When you hear of all this, and I think when there's infrastructure done, and now we're moving to a world where people are selling the carbon credits, where are we as Kenya Human Rights Commission on that debate of carbon credits? Who's benefiting from those carbon credits? When you hear about this new approach of conservancies, which are owning and controlling about 10% of the land mass through the NRT, but when you scratch NRT, you find that actually it is the Nature Conservancy of the US that is behind NRT. And you're thinking, why are we allowing an American organization to control 10% of our land mass in a country? How do we do this? Isn't this very much the same as the missionaries coming with the Bible, giving you the Bible in one hand, and then they shoot you with a gun in the other? We are now, is conservation the new colonial approach? We've got to keep asking the questions through and through, because one of the things we never want to do is just, as much as we encourage multinationals to come into a country as businesses, they're good, but without a local base of if the economy is controlled by foreigners, you're in trouble. So just the same way, our economy, our conservation, our businesses, there must be strong, dynamic local organizations. There must be. Otherwise, we are basically giving and selling the country away. That is a fundamental. And you look at all the countries that we call developed, and even take the ones that have been the social democratic in the Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, their economies are controlled by their own companies. And then they have multinationals coming in. But you cannot be developed. Even South Korea, the economy is controlled by South Korean companies. Whether we may not like it, because there are very many big, the Seven Sisters, but they are localized. They are national companies. We can't have a country that's controlled by foreigners with a few black people there as as fig leaves. You've got to be careful about that. There you go.
Okay, this is my solidarity.
Story, right? So the second executive director was Dr. Willie Mutunga, and we will be putting that on our website so you can see Dr. Willie Mutunga's reflections of the founding of the Kenya Human Rights Commission. Wanjiko Miano came after that. Modoni Wanyeki was fifth, and she's here. 1 minute, Modoni, come and say hi. So who was fourth? She will tell us. And then she'll tell us who she handed over to. Because George Kegoro, who is also here, was 7th. So between number 4, between number 3 there was someone. And then there was Modoni. And then there was someone. And then there was George. Now, the band is going to do something to welcome you. Band, Modoni is here. 1, 2, 3. These guys are not ready. They're not ready. You just do it.
To say, Gethuko, I like the name of your band. It continues the Mau Mau kind of story. So as I recall, it was Mina, then Willie, then Jennifer, then me, then Atsango, then George, then you. That's 6. Who? When what? Mwambi. Oh my God. Okay, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot. Okay. Well, greetings to all of my former team. I've seen many. Greetings to all of my leadership and all of my seniors. I have to say my years at the KHRC were really fundamental and kind of forming of my character and forming of my contribution towards Kenya. Not least because of who I had leading me. But actually, I started not as an ED under Macau and Kari here, but I started as a foot soldier because when I came back to Kenya in the height of Kenya Tuitikayo, which the Reverend was leading and many people were leading, Davinder, and we were small children. At least I was a small child in a foot soldier. The KHRC was really a home for, as somebody mentioned, all of the exiles who had come back, all of the students who had been detained, all of the underground, as small as it was. We did have a leftist underground, and it really was a home. And it was also a home for people like me who didn't come from that kind of background, but who wanted to contribute to change. And the KHRC was like a big family. Come, you have something to contribute, come. And those were the days of Kenya Tuitikayo, 4 C's, struggle for constitutional change, 5 C's, the incredibly brave people of RPP, including Gethuku, who's still here. The first time I went to one of the Saba Saba or Nana Nana or whatever, I was like, oh, what's happening? You know, I really felt I was like in a movie of students against apartheid or something. I was like, oh my God, these police are killing us. And there was RPP and Gethuko and company and Mathoni, and lying down, they were like, no, we just need to stay here. Katu. And, you know, meanwhile, the people in where we used to have all the rallies, they were like, please, don't bring your protests here. Every time you're here, the police break our homes, they steal our stuff, etc. Anyway, so I was a foot soldier and very grateful for that. And somebody mentioned that Buke is in the room. And Buke... Buke, apart from our history, at that point was, he was the predecessor, I think, of Boniface Mwangi, who's also in the room, because Buke's idea, the KHRC was really vibrant and creative, and Buke's idea on extrajudicial killings was, you know what, let's just dump these coffins in front of the police station. And the police were like, "Guy, what are you doing?" And I remember one day they were chasing Buka and team and some coffin of somebody who had been killed by the police in one direction, and the real coffin was being delivered, to make the point that what is happening now and what happened this year is completely unacceptable. We can never work and live under a state that kills its children in that kind of way for simply standing up for what is right. So the KHRC was the home of that action way back when. Boniface then decided he's dumping blood at Parliament and the MPs, and then we have Gen Z. So it's a wonderful tradition that we're part of. Much, much, much later, Macau and Betty got me to come and run the KHRC for a short period of time, and it was my privilege to be part of Kenya's change trajectory for the short period that I was there. And I just want to talk about 4 things that I think we contributed to. One, of course, was the conclusion of all the work on the recognition of the Mau Mau and their struggles for this country. It was during the time that I was there, and George is here who led that work. Mutisia is here, who was one of the petitioners, and walked the streets of London with young children coming up to him in London and sort of, "Are you the Mau Mau?" That's how much we got. But we got an apology. We got the monument that Devinder designed, and we got some compensation. We had to narrow the terms of the case to colonial torture, so only people who could prove they had been tortured. And of course, the Mau Mau were like, "Okay, we've got that. Now let's go to stage 2, which is land." And of course, land is something that remains grievous for all of us, especially, well, all across the country, but the coast, the rift, et cetera, et cetera. One thing I want to just highlight from the Mau Mau is because of the tendency of everyone to try and take over history, is to stress that it's the Mau Mau themselves who told me. That movement was from the coast to the lake, from the deserts to the south. Everyone contributed. It was not just a Gikuyu nationalist movement, and I say this, and it was not just about the armed struggle. Everyone fed into it. The traditional spiritual movements, the trade unions, the armed struggle, and so on. And we chose our claimants on the case to reflect that the Mau Mau was not just Gikuyu, it was a national struggle. So don't make the mistake of thinking that we're some kind of Gikuyu nationalists when we pay tribute to those who brought us our independence. So the Mau Mau case and finalizing that was one thing that we did in the short period I was there. The second thing, I was part of a big coalition, Kenyans for Peace with Truth and Justice, post-2007, that awful 2007. And I was actually up country somewhere in Mount Kenya. And I remember sort of as the results were coming in and we had monitors around the country and, you know, things were breaking out everywhere, calling Willie, who I knew as my leader when I came back. And Willie at that point, I think, was at Ford Foundation. He's like, so what do you think you should do? And I remember looking at the phone like, what is he saying? And what he was saying is, you're in charge. And we did what we could. Of course, out of all of the efforts of that coalition, Kenyans for Peace and Justice, I think we made some of the most significant contributions to the agreements that came out of the Kenyan National Dialogue and Reconciliation that eventually brought us our 2010 Constitution, 3 decades after Reverend Joya, Macau, Betty, everyone who had started this movement before. But we got that, and that was good. I think the other thing I wanted to talk about, and of course, you know, we had the post-election violence, we had the commission on the kinds of violence that we had seen in the post-election violence. George Kigoro now was secretary. I remember Macau and Kari coming to listen to me give testimony before the commission on what had happened. Of course, we never got accountability. And I think because we never got accountability, I see one of the doyens of the struggle for accountability on extrajudicial killings. Commander is sitting right here, who has fought tirelessly for the right of victims over several generations. And lo and behold, we have our young people, our 20-year-olds, this, you know, these past few months, and the same thing happened because we didn't achieve justice. But anyway, we had the commission, we know what we need to do. We have the KHRC, which Betty was the co-chair of, and which Macau was the chair of the committee to establish the TJRC. And I think that's the third thing that I want to talk about, is what the KHRC did to survivors of gross and systemic human rights violations, as well as international crimes. And I think the KHRC's innovation was really forming, like we did with Amawa, really taking direction from the Veterans Association, was those assassinated, those who had been through massacres, post-independence, really trying to form the survivors groups so that they led the struggle for what justice meant for them. And of course, some of those things we have won in court, the Nyao torture, Nyao house torture victims, even if they have yet to see the money. But it's the point of winning the cases also, the acknowledgement that this happened and that this was wrong. And that's the third thing I wanted to say. I think the KHRC's contribution has been is really helping survivors come together and advocate for what they want and really try and accompany their process. And the last thing I want to say, Lorna is sitting in the room and many other people, I remember when the KHRC took up the issue of SOGI rights, rights around sexual orientation and gender identity. And it was wonderful to work with a board. And Macau said, you know what, I've had enough of listening to why people do not want to support LGBTI rights. I give everyone in this commission 1 year. Either you get on the program or you get off the bus. And as a result, the KHRC, I can honestly say, was one of the first organizations to take on board queer interns with the idea of giving people the skills of what it means to work and run a human rights organization and to contribute, I think, to the growing field of SOGI rights organizations at the time, of which Lorna is one, or the GALC is one. Yeah, so that was big. And it came because people had courage in different ways. I think the courage that I've talked about, we all understand, but the courage around SOGI rights is something that is still not, unfortunately, understood in the way that it should be. So I think we contributed that way, we opened the doors. That's good. And in conclusion, just to say, I, like everyone else of my age, because I am of that age, was so inspired by the young people this year. I mean, so inspired. It was just so heartwarming to feel, like Mana said, that we were part of this long trajectory that brought us to this place. But I do feel, and I'm part of a group, and we said this yesterday watching what was happening in South Korea, that unfortunately we're now fighting just to stand in the same place. We're not moving forward. And I think the challenge for the KHRC moving forward is to be that intellectual home, to be that political home, to be that thought leadership for the future that isn't just about defending territory already won, but about sort of what's our new gains and not starting from the beginning. The struggle against extrajudicial killings is long. It didn't just begin this year. And we haven't concluded it. And I think we have to ask ourselves why. We've done everything. We've done police reform. We had the police reform working group. Kiama was part of it. We've done everything, but somehow they're still getting away with treating us like shit. And our children like shit. So, sorry, Macau is laughing because he knows that's the way I actually talk. Anyway, that's the home that we want the KHRC to be, the home that takes us forward and that isn't just about defending space. To everyone I've worked with and served with, who led me, who instructed me, who guided me, who took me through protests and so on, thank you so, so much. You've gave me so much more than I ever gave you.
Well done, and thank you very much. And finally, how many finalists did Modoni give us? And the last thing, and finally, and the last thing that I'd like to say is that Modoni told us, who came after you? Atsango Chesoni. And after Atsango Chesoni? Is George Kegoro in the house? Yeah. A round of applause, please. Let's hear from George Kegoro. And George is going to take us this. George, please don't give us your life story. I know yours is long. And something is happening. Number one, you've noticed that we've opened the bar so that the food can go down. And what happens when the bar is open is that conversations start happening, micro and nano conversations. And because we want to retain the room, we are therefore going to ask George to take this one up very fast. So George, you will welcome Betty, the former vice chair, who is going to welcome the longest serving chair of the Kenya Human Rights Commission. And I've got to say this before he comes, is that at some point I challenged Professor Makau Mutua. How long have you been chair of this commission? And I think after that, he went back and reflected. And he decided to do, George. Round of applause, please, for George.
Good evening, everybody. I see so many friends here tonight, and I feel very warm. I came with my son, and he was like, he's 14 years, so he was like, you know all those people? I know many people. So really, I'm among friends, truly, so it's a very comforting experience to be in this space and to see all of you tonight. Massive tribute to the founders of the Kenya Human Rights Commission. A massive tribute to those among those founders that stayed on and are still engaged with organization Macau. You're one of those who stayed on. Maina is one of those also who stayed on, and Willie as well. It was good for all of you to do what you did as the founding act, but it's even better that you've remained engaged for so long to see the vision that you started grow to where we are today. Massive tribute to all the people that have been part of the KHRC. There's the team I worked with. I see so many of yourselves here. My team, are you around? Yeah, thanks so much. And then there are the people who went before, and there are many others who come after. So we are part of a continuum of dedication, I think excellence as well sometimes. Great tribute also to the board, the current board, where thanks so much. You guys are great. And also the boards that have gone before, but also great, massive tribute to our partners, the larger KHRC family that we used to work with. Sometimes we had internal fights. They were vicious, but they are what kept us true to ourselves, and we appreciated what that was meant to achieve to keep us accountable. So I joined KHRC I was working as executive director of ICJ Kenya when Macau called me from New York, and he said, "We are happy to be sharing the leadership of Kenya's human rights community, and I would like to invite you to become the next executive director of the Kenya Human Rights Commission." That's after Muthoni left. I reflected on it. I told him, "Macau, I think I have a job still to do here at ICJ Kenya. I'm sorry, I must say no." So I declined. 4 years later, after Tango left, Macau called me again from New York and told me, "I hope this time you will not say no to me." I said, "Macau, I think it's 4 years later. I feel that my mission at ICJ Kenya is done because I was now in my 8th year at KHRC, at ICJ Kenya. I think I can come over to KHRC." And that is how I arrived at the Kenya Human Rights Commission, found a great team with whom I worked. Many things I think that were sort of the part of our story during my time. We did the story around statelessness. It started, where is Diana in the room? When you speak statelessness, it's Diana. Diana, statelessness. So, so Diana had been working with the partners at the coast, trying to move that to some level of seriousness, and there was the government was not biting. Then we said we are going to do what we were calling it a trek. Yes, we are doing a trek from the coast in Kwale to Nairobi with the Makonde community. We had some organization working with the Kwale County government and so on and so forth. So we started the journey. There were prayers. Father Dolan prayed for us. The Kwale County government prayed for us that morning. And we had some buses. We had the Makonde community. Is Thomas Nguli here? Mzee uko? Nakuona na wenzako mko? Great. So when we got onto the buses from Makongeni, a few kilometers down the line, Marwa, the coast PC, by whatever title called, he was waiting for us with a long convoy of vehicles. And he had hired a hall, which he wanted us to sit in so that he can address us. Can you imagine? And we said, "We are not getting into your hall." I called Maina from the roadside in New York. Because this guy has gleaming cars and he has police. And he's saying, "You must sit in that hall and I will address you." And so I called Maina. I told him, "Maina, I have a situation here. What do I do?" Maina said, "Do no harm. Consult the Makonde. They tell you what they want to do. If they want to be addressed, let them be addressed. If they refuse, they refuse, but don't get people hurt." So we had a consultation among ourselves, and so I went up to Marwa. I thought I should introduce Marwa and myself to Marwa as the leader of the group. So I went up to him. I said, "Marwa, my name is George Kegoro. I'm the executive director of the Kenya Human Rights Commission, and I don't fear you." That was my introduction, and he was like, "Okay." Then Mr. Mwangi, the DO who had prayed with us that morning, when he saw me challenge Marwa that way, he came between me and Marwa, wanted me to be swallowed into the police and disappeared. Marwa said, no, I like this kind of challenge. Leave him alone. So then, so Marwa and I had a conversation, and he said, "We are going to Nairobi. We are not coming to you. And we'll go to Nairobi." So Marwa left us alone. We went ahead. A few kilometers down the line, Marwa had cordoned us off again, and now he demanded to address us on a field. He didn't have a hall this time. So we went onto a field. Marwa addressed us, gave me a phone to speak to Nkaiseri. And they said, "Here is the Minister for Interior, speak to him." I said, "I'm not going to speak. That's your minister. You speak to him." And then when he finished addressing us, he said the chance was given to the Makonde to speak for themselves. Mzee Nguli spoke. Mzee akasema, tukija maafisi zenu mnasema tuende Nairobi. Tukitaka kwenda Nairobi mnatuzuia. Sisi tuende Nairobi bana. So the Makonde spoke for themselves. They said they're going to Nairobi. Diana broke into song. We left Marwa on the field and marched on. Now Marwa arrested us a third time in Voi. And that was a godsend, because that is what got us into national news. That there's a group of people who have been arrested in Voi. We don't know who they are or why. And then we are now trending. By the time we get to Nairobi, the country knows there is a group of people who have been moving into Nairobi. We don't know what they want. And by then now, the State House. So we got here one more problem. Where is Boniface Mwangi? Boniface, you are so instrumental. We get here into Nairobi. We meet Katam. Katam was the PPO, police officer here in Nairobi. He had a big police group that had arrested us here. So now we go to Nyayo House. We do kuchafua, in the city. Then there was the guy in charge of Kialangwa. Kialangwa came down to address us, and we left him and we came to the park. He followed us. He had a suit. He fell on the road and the suit was dusty. And then when finally, because he was telling us, Nkaiseri wants to address us, we didn't believe him. But it was actually true. Because when you go to the park, Nkaiseri then came to the park. And then he said, I want to, now, before then, the police want to club us. The Boniface is the one who was like, no, you can't do this to these people. If they were Kikuyus, would you have stopped them from going to State House? And then, so the police were like, okay. So Boniface held that space. Thank you. I told you that. And if Boniface, Nkaiseri says, now I've come for you. The president is waiting for you on State House. We were dirty. We have been on the road for days. Before long, the police were opening up roads, and we were before the Uhuru Kenyatta, and the Makonde were before Uhuru Kenyatta, and Uhuru said, your troubles are over. We worked with the Marwa to do the registration process, all that, and then that is how the first group got their stateless. We then did the Shona. Are they here? The Shona group, are they here? It was a different, it's also a story by itself, I promise. But I will not go into it. And then, so the Shona also got in, and when we went to the Makonde celebration in Kwale, the state eclipse stars, it was actually campaign time now. It was a Jubilee rally. We found ourselves in a Jubilee rally, and we were never referred to. Uhuru never became aware we were in the dais. The poor woman from UNHCR, she was sitting in a Jubilee rally, never acknowledged. And she was white, so she's very standing out in this crowd. And then Kaiseri comes to me later after the rally ends, and he's like, because how he explained it to Uhuru is like, Mtukufu Rais, nilipata report kwamba kuna watu wanateseka hapa Kwale. Wewe ukanipa buses, nikaenda nikawaleta mpaka State House. Ukawapatia hicho. Makofi kwa Rais. That's how our story was not there. Then when I went to Kaiseri, like, why did you do that? He said, uliona vile nilikujenga. So anyway, later we did our own commemoration with the Makonde in Makongeni. And you know who was our guest of honor? Marwa. Marwa turned into our greatest advocate for the ending of statelessness. We worked so well with him. And so And when we did the Shona based on what we had done with the Makonde, I just thought the best way is to work with the insiders. That ended up being a very much shortened process. We were in Kiambu and so on and so forth, but we worked with the insider. It's a story by itself. I'm not going to go into it. During my time also, we did, it's the time we did elections, Kura Yangu, all these outstanding colleagues. It was during that time we supported the alternative election petitions, and it was during that time that the Supreme Court overturned the presidential election, and we were part of that heavy lifting, I think, that went into that. Before that, I need to talk about some delicate work that Macau was involved in. Macau, should I or should I not? So we have huge problems with our opposition friends. They're trying to consolidate themselves into a political outfit. They can't find a way to talk among themselves. There's a reaching out by the Odinga side. They can't get themselves sorted out, and time is running out. And so, how do we help them to find a way to broker? So I reached out to Macau in New York. I told Macau, there's this problem. Please come to Nairobi. But you must call those two principals when you're in New York and tell them the only reason why you're coming to Nairobi is to see them. Then they will take that your visit seriously, which is what Macau did. We briefed the board, and the board said, go ahead. Macau came over. He met Raila Odinga, Kalonzo separately, met Kalonzo Musyoka separately. Kalonzo had an insider helper. Macau was kind of the insider helper with Raila Odinga in a secret location somewhere that will not be named. There was a very, very difficult negotiation, and that negotiation is what brokered the election formation called CORD. So there were two copies of the agreement, the MOU. One of them is kept by Macau, and the other one is kept by Kibwana, who was the insider for Kalonzo Musyoka. Now we've disclosed. We can give you further details, but that was extremely delicate work that the Kenya Human Rights Commission did, because we felt that organizing, helping people to broker a negotiation among themselves is important for the democratic processes in this country. The last thing I want to talk about is, I think the agenda of settling ourselves in a new home. We had been on Gitanga Road for a long time. We had some money that Modoni and groups before had, and Betty had gathered. Then we were not going ahead with just consolidating ourselves in a decision to buy a home. The money was not enough, so we needed to do additional fundraising. I was, as a new executive director, thanks to people like Modoni who are now at the Open Society, I was given an executive, a new executives fund, a grant. I think I got 16 million. I put all that into the kitty for the purchase of the new land. And then topped up with the monies that we had saved that from a different session and so on and so forth. We leveraged all that, and we got ourselves that beautiful, beautiful place where we have now. When Davis invited me, he asked him, Davis, why didn't we do this in our place? So I think, Davis, you owe us a homecoming, a housewarming, so that we can brag. And that new home reflects this. Maina said in his speech, we were a briefcase NGO and that kind of thing. Now we are not a briefcase NGO. That home communicates this, that we are here to stay. It also communicates this, we are not a pushover. we have muscle and we can protect ourselves, and because we can protect ourselves, we also feel a duty to protect others. Yes. Talking about others, we had this sort of very love-hate relationship with partners. Some of them we would have and I remember speaking to Macau when we had this conversation with the social justice centers in our tent there. We used to do all this convening, and they talked very tough on us. And I was like, Macau, this is it actually rattled me, because I really like to. And then Macau said, he gave me a particular way of, this is how you must understand that relationship and try and manage it and that kind of thing. And I think by and large we had a good time together, and I feel that during our time we pushed things in the right direction. So I end here. I end in the following way. KHRC was started by Kenyan exiles during a difficult political time. It is as though, and this has been said, the wheel has turned a full circle. And we are in exactly the same type of difficulties that were present in the 90s. What is worse between now, from then, is that the challenges we have are not national, they are actually regional. And what happened to Kiza Besigye is evidence of that. And I'm just saying, and because Macau, you've got friends now in power. What I'm saying is, it is a moment for all of us to reflect very carefully about what we do. As Modoni said, KHRC needs to remain the place that holds the space that we've won together, but also needs to be the place where we respond to what is facing us, and also build for an alternative for the country outside of the possibilities that are being set for us. Thank you very much. And I now call Betty Murungi, who in very many ways has been a key mainstay of the Kenya Human Rights Commission. Betty, you've got the mic.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Eric Latif has told me not to tell a story, and I will not do any storytelling. But Macau, I'm not your Gashagwa. So I am not going to introduce him with a lot of vigelegele and shangwe and whatever else. I just want to acknowledge and congratulate our Kenya Human Rights Commission. We've done well. Congratulations. Our story has been told so eloquently by our executive directors who have spoken, and we owe them a debt of gratitude. Our staff, throughout all those 30 years. One thing I'd like to clear is that I was guilty, but not as guilty as Macau. I stayed on as a board member of the KHRC for 18 years. During difficult times, but also during times when we scored a lot of successes. I'm really glad Macau is no longer the chairperson of the KHRC. Yeah, because well, now it would be, what did George say, these insider what? What did he call them? Insider what? Oh, no, you are exaggerating. I don't think it's deep state, but I'm pretty excited that we were able to exit the board of the KHRC, although it took us a long while. And I'm hopeful that he will explain a little bit of why it took that long for us to exit. In fact, even after I'd exited the KHRC, a year ago, I got a call from Soila. Is Soila in the house? Yeah, these wonderful people who work at the KHRC. And she said to me, Kare, I'm sending you forms to sign because according to the NGO Council, you are still the vice chair of the KHRC. So those of you who are now on the board, Mtechi and Wanjiro, I was still on the board last year. You realize that, right? Yeah, so I had to resign and it was formalized and so on. And I was, I thought I'd stopped being on the board like 6 years ago. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. Anyway, it now gives me great pleasure to welcome, I will not introduce him, to welcome Makau Mutua, Professor Makau Mutua, to come up and give his address. But before Makau, you come, I just wanted to acknowledge Karuti Kanyinga and Davinda Lamba, Mumina Konzo, she's not here, John Gidongo, Dolan, Father Dolan, we served with him on the board. I can't recall, is there another member of the board who was there with us that served during that time? Mwambi Mwasaru, who was also our ED. It was an excellent time that we had on the board. My work on the board was really to do the hard work that Makau didn't want to do. Which was, yes, and Modoni can confirm, which was to look at all the annual work plans to make sure that all our proposals were in order, to make sure there was no pilfering of resources, to make sure we're reporting on time. And so I was in daily contact with the staff and the ED, and I just want to thank Modoni, George, and Jennifer, who were the EDs, and Malombe, actually, who were the EDs when I served in my capacity as the vice chair. Actually, I was the substantive chair of the board. So, karibu.
Thank you so much. Please give a round of applause for the substantive chair of the KHRC. First of all, let me say how grateful I am that all of you have come here today to celebrate with us your organization, this historic organization in this country. The KHRC was and continues to be the founding organization of the struggle for human rights in this country. And I want to say that we take pride in having incubated and helped establish so many human rights groups in this country. We take a lot of pride in that. But before I promise I'll only be short, but before I give my substantive remarks, I just want to say that I neither can confirm or deny the story that George Kegoro told. It has never been confirmed, and it has never been denied. So we'll leave it at that. But I just want to say that there is a story that is told about human rights activism. And it is a story of mindless work by busybodies. people who have nothing useful to do with their lives, layabouts, restless young people, subversives, even terrorists. But I just want to say that all that is bunk, as in B-U-N-K, also known as BS. The work of human rights, it's a work of the intellect. It is the work of praxis, between practice and theory. You can never do human rights work unless you're also thinking. Because human rights work is a work of transformation. It is the work of creation of new societies, of possibilities, of glimpses of eternity about what the human agency could achieve. And I know that there are those who have always doubted that folks in the global south can think, that they can stand the canvas of the intellect, of conception, of jurisprudence in human rights. There are those who doubt that and who regard us as just as crude as pit latrines, who are there to accept anything that is given to us. Well, this is a story that the KHRC rejected and proved wrong. We understood from a very early moment that the work of human rights is the work of those who sit at the intersection of power and powerlessness, and those who push the lever on the part of the powerless. We understood that. And we understood that challenge, and we took it on. But we also understood with humility, even as we celebrate here today, our 32 years. And I want to say, because I'm the encyclopedia of the KHRC, that it is, the KHRC was formed in 1991, but registered in 1992. It is the formation that is important, not the registration. Let's get that right. But as I said, we understood that our work was the work of standing between those who are powerful and those who are powerless. But we also understood with humility, as I was saying, that in the struggle for human rights, which is a struggle for rights, and the struggle for rights, make no mistake about it, is a struggle about fights. Fights about identity, about power, about resources, about belonging. We understood this very well. Very clearly, we understood that. But we also understood that we were not the oppressed. We were elites. God damn it. Some of us had gone to Harvard. And taught there. Not just gone there, but taught there. Okay? We understood that in the struggle there are two classes: the oppressed and the oppressors. And we understood that we belong to the oppressor class. Make no mistake about it. Don't sit there and pat yourself in the back. You are a part of the oppressor class. However, the oppressor class is graduated. If you pause it, you will see that there's an oppressor, part of the oppressor class that has empathy. And there's a part of the oppressor class that has antipathy. And we think of ourselves as the oppressor class that has empathy. Because we are not the oppressed, much as they beat us over the head with rungus, we are not the oppressed. Try to be the oppressed, and you know what I mean. All of you live well. All of you drive vehicles. All of you are graduates, many of you. That defines you as a member of the oppressor class. And so what we are doing here, and what we have done for 32 years, is to join hands with the oppressed to help them in that struggle against the oppressors. But we are not the oppressed. So do not pat us on the back. Don't. Because we haven't lost much. Even when we get beat up, we become heroes. We are not the oppressed. The oppressed are somewhere else. They are not here tonight. They are not where? Here tonight. Okay? Maybe there's one or two. But the number is minuscule. But I want to return to this idea of the KHRC and its 32-year history. And I want to laud and congratulate the organization for several things that I think are very important. One, we were among the first organizations to argue openly and without fear or favor that human rights is politics. To argue that human rights, it is partisan. It is not non-partisan. You cannot be non-partisan with oppressors, with fascists. You cannot. You must be partisan. And you must always be able to choose the lesser of two evils in pragmatic politics. And that is why in 2002, looking at KANU and looking at NAC, we had no qualms endorsing NAC. Of course, NAC betrayed us later, but we made the right choice because human rights is politics. Secondly, we sought to expand and enlarge the canvas, the conceptual and intellectual canvas of the human rights movement in this country and elsewhere. We rejected the notion that the attainment of democracy or civil rights was equal to the attainment of human dignity. We rejected that notion. We said that simply because you have a democracy and you have a society that respects civil and political rights, that you have attained human dignity. We talked in the KHRC about economic despotism. We asked the question, how can Bill Gates be allowed to exist? Elon Musk, These individuals who are so powerful that they can buy whole countries, those are economic despots. We understood that. And that is why in our program, we talked about social justice. We talked about a society based on social justice, okay? And if we are to be honest, democratic societies which are socially accountable for their economic policies to the people. We talked about that at the KHRC. We expanded that canvas. But we also decided that the notion of equality was a fiction. It's a legal fiction because it's abstract. It's abstract. We agreed in the commission that we would go for the substance of that notion, not its abstract manifestation. Okay? The notion of formal equality and individual autonomy, we said those are just abstractions. We want to see
30 years ago, a vision was sparked and a movement.
Where's the substance? And that's where the notion of social justice comes in. And that's how we were able to expand the canvas of human rights. But we also said another thing that Muthoni, my very able ED, said, that we took on bigots who would limit the rights of others. And we were the first organization, I believe, in this country, in a mainstream way, to talk about sexual orientation. No, we were there. Yeah. People called us names. And you know what we told them? We gave them the middle finger. No pun intended. Okay? But fundamentally, we agreed that the commission was a labor of the intellect, that between practice and theory was dialogic intercourse that was explosive. We decided that, and we have pursued it to date. And I'm glad to say this many years later, we are there. Now, I want to address one more issue. And this is the issue of, which was adverted to by my able friend, Eric Latif. And Eric, I expect that you'll be running for office soon. But I just want to say that I stayed as chair of the commission for, shall I say, 30 years. And I say that without shame. Okay? Because, you know, let me tell you something. The KHRC was a democratic organization. And if you don't think it is, look at Betty, look at Maina Kiai, look at Willie Mutunga, look at all the others. And every time I would seek to leave, they would say no. And you know what? You know what? You know what, guys? The proof of the pudding is always in the eating. And that is what you are eating tonight. All right? Yeah, so with those few remarks, I just want to say that I would not, and we would not, be here today, but for the vision of those who came before us. I want to read a paragraph, if my phone will allow me, from an excerpt of a speech by Martin Luther King Jr., the I Have a Dream speech. No, sorry, I'll be on the mountaintop.
Partners.
Okay? All right? Let me see if I found it. well. I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. And I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know this tonight, that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried. And I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And I would say to you, that describes the commission. Of course, as you all know, Martin Luther King was assassinated the following day. Of course, the commission's soul lives on, and it will live on. I want to close by these words. The Kenya Human Rights Commission is a mafia. And you know what the mafia do? They shoot you when you fuck with them. What is the problem? The English language is written to be spoken. So for those who have been part of the KHRC mafia as staff, as EDs, as board members, I want you to stand and be acknowledged. We love you. We love you. We adore you. We love you and we adore you. Please be seated. I want to say this, one more thing. George likes to accuse me of many things. He's accused me of having friends in high places. In fact, it is George who taught me how to be friends with people in high places. But you know, the struggle has many permutations. Okay? If you keep on speaking to yourself, you'll be speaking to the hand. I ask all of you, as I've always asked the Commission, to be pragmatic without compromising your principles, to be steadfast, and to be open to discussions with your opponents. You do not make peace with your friends. You do not. You make peace with your enemies. And you know, we're all Kenyans. We're all Kenyans. If you look at the constellation of the people today who are in power, and people who are out of power, people in power and out of power, they have all been together at one point or another. Okay? So if you And I say this with all honesty. If you want to be a purist, you will not be dialogic. Because those who are out are seeking political power. And if they get political power, they will be your oppressors tomorrow. Okay? They're only purists today because they're out of power. Hypocrisy is what defines politics. Okay? So I want to tell the human rights movement tonight here, let's be pragmatic. Let's be political. Let's be astute. Freedom is not a straight line from point A to B. Never been that way. Can never be that way. Because it's a social, political process. Okay? So, George, even if I have friends in high places, cut me some slack. Okay? Cut me some slack. On that note, I want to call to the stage all the board members who are here, past and present. To the stage. To the stage. To the stage. And I want to call all the EDs who are in the audience to come up. The EDs. Can we get some music? Can we get some music? Let's get some music.
Oh, music.
Music.
And I can say that there's no mafia without a boss.
Some music. I want us to celebrate all these great men and women who have made the KHRC what it is. And on that note, I want to say thank you. I saw the Ash guy in the crowd. Thank you to him. I saw Jill. Thank you very much. I saw our elected leaders. Thank you so much. We thank you, all of you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Our elected leaders, like Babu Owino, Mr. Senator Onyango, Senator Manzo, Wanda Mganga, former MP, all of you, we thank you. Thank you so much.
Afrika na wananchi wote, oye tutasonga kwa siasa nzuri. Tukomboe Afrika na wananchi wote, wale Bungoma tuingie kwa siasa nzuri, kwa siasa nzuri. Hey, tutasonga kwa siasa nzuri. Tukomboe Afrika na wananchi wote.
That was not. Sawa. Professor Makao Mutua, thank you very much. Please take your seat. That was not a vote of thanks. The vote of thanks is still coming. That was just the long-serving chairman acknowledging his juniors in the mafia and acknowledging that a coup took place. And, now, look at the time. we must finish this program in the next 30 minutes. Right? Are we in agreement? Do I have the room? Ole yo! Ole yo! Ole yo! Ole yo! Very good. Now, we need to wind up the program in the next 30 minutes. And I just wanted to rule by the rule of democracy here. I don't know if you still fear it, but let me acknowledge that I am a champion of this constitution. The constitution says that there shall be public participation. We have a couple of things to do here, which is we need to launch a book that commemorates 30 years of the Kenya Human Rights Commission legacy. And we are going to also recognize and acknowledge our founders, past and present, board members and executive directors. And with that, we know that we have politicians in the house. I know what politicians do. When they see a crowd, they always want to acknowledge. So let us put our hands together and acknowledge the presence of Babu Owino, the Member of Parliament for Embakasi East. He's in the house. The Senator for Makueni County, Dan Maanzo. The Senator for Kisii County, Richard Onyonka. Now, our legislators, you'll bear with us because of time. We want to move into the next session. And to usher us into this next session, I want us to all rise up. The field marshals are going to take us into this one. In 1 minute, we rise up because we have been seated for very long to stretch, and then we shall launch our book and award our long-serving and long-fighting human rights defenders. Everybody please to your feet. Donge Githuku and the field marshals.
Songa kwa siasa nzuri, tukomboe Afrika na wananchi wote. Tutasonga kwa siasa nzuri, tukomboe Afrika na wananchi wote. Wale sugoi tuingie kwa siasa nzuri, kwa siasa nzuri. Tutasonga kwa siasa nzuri, tukomboe Afrika na wananchi wote. Twende tutasonga kwa siasa nzuri, tukomboe Afrika na wananchi wote. Wale Kisumu tuchukue kwa siasa nzuri, kwa siasa nzuri. Tutasonga kwa siasa nzuri, tukomboe Afrika na wananchi wote. Tutasonga kwa siasa nzuri, tukomboe Afrika na wananchi wote. Hata Nakuru tuchukue kwa siasa nzuri, kwa siasa nzuri.
Okay.
Tutasonga kwa siasa nzuri, tukomboe Afrika na wananchi wote. Tutasonga kwa siasa nzuri, tukomboe Afrika na wananchi wote.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody.
Kwa siasa nzuri.
Ole yo! Ole yo! Let's be seated, please. Let's be seated. Now, the journey of the Kenya Human Rights Commission has been documented, and there's a documentary to showcase this. Komchetsi, board member, order. I want to call up Komchetsi Makoha, board member, alongside Wanjiru Gikonyo. Where's Irene Soila? We are going to have a quick session of recognizing the founders, former board members, former EDs, eminent rights defenders, partners, and we shall launch a book. And first up, I'd like us to, of course, acknowledge the 5 eminent rights defenders, because they've been with us for all this time and they've been seated in the audience for all this time, and of course they're tired, so we can recognize them. And then we're also going to watch a documentary and launch a book. Oi, Soila? Soila? So, Wajiro and Komchetsi, karibu on stage. We'll begin with the eminent rights defenders. We begin with the eminent rights defenders. We award them. You'll call them up on stage one by one. And then we shall go to former board members and former EDs.
Public land grabbing, corruption, and land reform. So let's go the Firimbi again. And all the ways is past, present, and that we might see in the future.
Who is grabbing our land? Who's that? Who's grabbing the land? Now, there's work that's been done by a team led by, among others, Komchetsi Makoha. All of you know that he is a prolific writer. So he took time to write. He worked with another team that also took time to document. And in the documentation, they put together a book that talks about the legacy of the Kenya Human Rights Commission. Now, we are going to call up several people to come and participate in the launching of this book. But before that, I'll call Komchetsi to come and tell us what is the content of this particular book, what's on the cover, and why the cover is a hard book, and everything else.
Good evening. I am not fortunate at all because I'm speaking to you past your bedtime, if you are my age. So I am going to be very brief. One of the things that I had Professor Makau Mutua say that I think resonates with what I'm about to tell you is that if you don't tell your story, other people will tell it. And you might not like the manner in which they tell it. So that is really the long and short of the Kenya Human Rights Commission saying that being in the trenches and being above ground and being on the streets, we also bring a story from that experience. And so that is why then this book, Rights and Fights, was conceptualized. It's not a hagiography of all the things that, when I read through it, it's not a hagiography of all the things that, great things that human rights defenders do. It acknowledges those struggles, the arguments. I would say it's a candid conversation because those people, and you know, we are all in a brotherhood or a sisterhood. Macau called this the mafia. But we also have very, very loud contestations. And those contestations, I think, are captured in the interviews that informed this book. I would like to acknowledge the person who led the writing. That's Brian Obara. If you're in the house, please just give him a hand clap. Brian Obara is about, please stand up if you're around. Yes, he joined the mafia because Brian worked with me many years ago before he defected to go and work for the Standard. And now we are glad that he's back home.
So it's Friday, tomorrow is Saturday, the bar counters will not close. So, on behalf of the Kenya Human Rights Board, may I take this opportunity to thank you all for gracing this momentous occasion. Sure, without you, this would not have been successful. Just a few takeaway home. We must remain courageous and fight for our rights. We are here to stay, and we are not pushovers. Yes. Are we together? Yes. We are not pushovers. Let us celebrate, organize, and remain vigilant. So special thanks to the liberation heroes, starting with our founding directors and members, our development partners who have worked with us all this time, our peers and CSO partners. We don't take it for granted that you find time out of your very busy schedules to join us to celebrate KHRC at 30. So the journey continues, a luta continua. All the best. Viva, comrades, viva! The band, the band.
Jambele yaku kanyanga 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 nasote tukotaya ekeja kando yako kanyanga 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 nasote tukotaya. Gesi boy ikija sote tuko tayari gesi ikija sote tuko tayari ikija mbele yako kanyaga kanyaga oh kanyaga kanyaga sote tuko tayari ikija kando yako kanyaga, kanyaga, oh, kanyaga, nasote tuko tayari. Sikiza. Sakayo, akija. Shuka. Sote tuko tayari. Sakayo, akija, nasote tuko tayari. Akija mbele yako, kanyaga, 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 oh, kanyaga, kanyaga, nasote tuko tayari. Akija kando yako, kanyaga, 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 oh, kanyaga, kanyaga, nasote tuko tayari. Skiza. Abductions zao zikija, sote tuko tayari. Abductions zikija, sote tuko tayari. Zikija Makongeni, kanyaga, Kangemi kanyaga, Mathare kanyaga, oh kanyaga, sote tuko tayari. Zikija Kole Mwimuto, kanyaga kedesheko hey kondele kanyaga nasote tuko Jesus kidnapping sikija sote tuko tayari generali kidnapping sikija nasote tuko tayari Keja kando yako, kanyaga, kanyaga, kama jenzi kanyage, kanyage, na sote tuko tayari. Keja kando yako, kanyaga, kanyaga, oh, kanyaga, kanyaga, na sote tuko tayari. Listen, Risa says I sikija, sote tuko tayari. Risa says sikija, sote tuko tayari. Sikija mbele yako, kanyaga kwa nguvu, kanyaga, sote tuko tayari. Sikija kando yako, kanyaga, oh, kanyaga, kanyaga, sote tuko tayari. Yeah, tia gesi yao ikija, sote tuko tayari. Tia gesi ikija, sote tuko tayari. Ikija mbele yako, kanyaga kwa nguvu, kanyaga, kanyaga, sote tuko tayari. Ikija kando yako, kanyaga, kanyaga, sote tuko tayari. Listen. Chibebe wo ikija, sote tuko tayari. Chibebe wo ikija, sote tuko tayari. Ikija kando yako, kanyaga, kanyaga, sote tuko tayari. Ikija pale nyumbani, kanyaga kwa nguvu, oh, kanyaga, kanyaga, sote tuko tayari. Listen, extrajudicial killing, ikija, sote tuko tayari. Extrajudicial killing, ikija, sote tuko tayari. Sekeja mulolongo, kanyaga, Kondele, Mombasa, kanyaga, kanyaga, sote tuko tayari. Sekeja kando yako, kanyaga, Isiolo, kanyaga, Mandera, kanyaga, kanyaga, sote tuko tayari. Tuluma yao ikija, sote tuko tayari. Tuluma ikija, sote tuko tayari. Sekeja kando yako, Sekeja kando yako, kanyaga, 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 sote tuko tayari. Sekeja kando yako, kwa nguvu, kanyaga, kanyaga, sote tuko tayari. Sekeja hapa Nairobi, kanyaga, kanyaga, Yesu, kanyaga, kanyaga, sote tuko tayari. Viva Africa, viva! Phil Marshall's coming to you live and direct from the Phil Marshall's FM. This is your favorite DJ, Salim. Yes. Teso, ebagi nyumazi nwaenda ata na tocha we ata na nyayo hao oh tocha we halale ya ya we emai ya ya we